Alright, so for my contemporary issue presentation, I did mine on hydraulic fracturing and its impact on local water supplies. Now, if you haven't been living under a rock for the past 5 years, you've probably heard something of fracking or hydraulic fracturing on the news. There's many documentaries on Netflix, including Gasland, showing the negative impacts on fracking with contaminating local water systems, groundwater for farmland, killing cows, and having a range of negative impacts. So what we'll cover is a basic outline of the hydraulic fracturing process, where exactly in the lower 48 fracking takes place. We'll find out which parts of the water tables are being contaminated, what they're being contaminated with, the consequences of these contaminations, and where oil and gas companies can improve when it comes down to protecting the environment and protecting our ecosystems. So you should be able to walk away today knowing what hydraulic fracturing is, how it's done, a brief history of it. How does it contaminate water supplies? What are the consequences of contaminating the water supply? And again, how can it be improved? Here's a brief overview of what a fracking site looks like. So the goal of fracking is to release natural gas from underground wells. Now, most natural gas deposits are encased in rock. And in the case of North America, most of our deposits are encapsulated by a shale layer. You've probably heard of shale gas in Pennsylvania, in Texas, and parts of the Rocky Mountains. Now, to release this natural gas, millions of gallons of water, sand, and a trade secret concoction of nasty chemicals is injected under the earth, where it fractures the rock encapsulating the natural gas well. The natural gas then seeps back through the pipeline up to the surface, where it is collected and used to generate power and meet our energy demands. So the process starts where a bore hole is drilled to about 1.5 miles down, and then it goes horizontally out. And then a compression device is lowered where to 1.5 miles down to the bottom of it, where it fissures the surrounding shale layer. After that, the concoction of water, sand, and chemicals is injected at extremely high pressures, where it further increases and expands these fissures, which then allows natural gas to flow back through the pipeline to the surface, where it can be collected and condensed into maybe liquefied petroleum and used for any number of processes. Now, fracking it's not a new technique. Halliburton has used it since 1948, so it's been around the block for a while. This isn't some new technology. It's actually it's a pretty crude technique, and today it's seeing more and more use to meet our energy demands and kind of gain an independence from foreign oil. So as I said before, most of our shale gas is in the Northeast, especially in the Pennsylvania area. There are also large reserves in Texas, the Rockies, and Montana and Idaho. There are many benefits to fracking. With the increased price of oil, we can become independent of foreign countries for our energy supply. It can also fuel economic growth. Cheap energy means reduced costs for businesses, and it can serve as a huge boost for manufacturing. And it also, natural gas as opposed to, coal burning or oil burning power plants can reduce CO2 emissions by 16%. So, in a sense, it is a green technology, even though it has some negative impacts on our water supply. So what makes up fracturing fluid? Well, 99% of it is water and sand. The 1% is not exactly known because of oil and gas companies won't disclose what's in the 1% due to trade secrecy agreements. But there have been some corporate leaks, and we now have a pretty good idea of what chemicals can constitute that 1%, and it's pretty horrifying, to tell you the truth. So, there are up to 600 chemicals that can be used. The most common are ethylene glycol, chlorobenzene, methanol, guar gum, polyacrylamide, glutaraldehyde, and ammonium bisulfite, hydrochloric acid, and natural radioactive isotopes that are in the underground layers by themselves, such as radium and uranium. Now, most of these are, not most, all are extremely toxic, whether it's carcinogenic, radioactive, mutagenic, and you could say, yeah, but they only consist of 1% of the fracturing fluid. Well, one fracking process uses around 3 million gallons of fracking fluid. So you take 1% of that, and you have anywhere from 10 to 100,000 gallons of these chemicals being pumped underground. So how do they contaminate the water supply? Well, not all of the fracking fluid is recovered once it is injected underground at high pressure. Some of it seeps into the shale layer, and the oil and gas companies reassure us that once it gets in the shale layer, there's no way it can permeate or diffuse through these lower ground layers. Problem with that is, unless these ground layers are granite, they're going to be porous, and there's going to be some diffusion of these toxins into lower aquifers, water tables, etc. The biggest danger, by far, is the first 100 to 500 feet. And this is where most of your underground water wells lay, your water tables, and the upper aquifers are. So oil and gas companies try to add in 2 barriers of protection. They first encase the drilling borehole through. They encase it in steel, and then they encase it with a second layer of concrete. Problem is, this concrete encapsulation fractures, and when you're pumping millions of gallons of high pressure fluid, even the steel can fracture. And as you'll see in later slides, not only can the fracking fluid leak into the aquifer, but also the natural gas deposits themselves can get into this water layer with drastic consequences. And additional sources of contamination can occur at the surface. So once fracking fluid, some of the fracking fluid is recaptured and recycled. They have waste treatment centers on site. They'll be stored in tanks. Problem is, these tanks often leak, and that can then lead to the contamination of rivers, creeks, ponds, any local bodies of water. But not only that, the huge detriment of contaminating the water table is it manages to find its way into most bodies of water at the surface. Once you pollute the aquifer, you pollute everything else. So So I have a quick video to show you what happens when some of the methane escapes from the first 100 to 500 feet of the drilling site. So concentrations of methane can reach 17 times higher than normal in well water. And this one lady in the Chesapeake area actually sets her tap water on fire.
I can often hold a standard kitchen match to my water, and like I said, it is unpredictable, but the methane randomly travels with the water, and sometimes it will light quite spectacularly. Just like that.
Now, I don't know about you, but I don't exactly want to be drinking that water. The local fracking oil and gas company in the area blamed it. They said it was natural. It was natural methane in that underground well. I can understand if it's like a natural hot spring, but this lady was nowhere near any kind of geothermal activity, and it's a little corporate dishonesty going on there. So of the 632 chemicals that were listed by a study found to be in fracturing fluid, 3/4 of them affect sensory organs: hair, skin, nails, teeth, etc. 40 to 50% can affect the nervous system, the immune system, cardiovascular systems. 37% can disrupt your endocrine system, causing thyroid cancers, pancreatic cancers. And 25% of these chemicals are known carcinogens and have been known to lead to cancers and tumors. This is one of the early signs that people noticed things going wrong near fracking sites is farmers noticed their livestock keeling over in fields and dying. In addition, you would have fields of cows that were going bald, their hair was falling out. There's also a 60% increase in the number of stillborn calves, along with a number of birth defects. And this is a picture just outside of, I don't know exactly what part. This is central Louisiana, and you can see the fracking site in the background. 17 cows died just 24 hours after ingesting fracking fluid that leaked. I believe it was from a containment vessel, which you can probably see here. I know this isn't a low-resolution video, but hopefully you can make that out. So yes, clearly fracking fluid is not something we want in our water table. This is a list of different methods and their frequency of how fracking fluid can find its way into the environment. As you can see, most of the contamination is in underground wells and spring water and other artesian sources, which shows that the fracking fluid finds its way into the water table and the aquifers. You also have some runoff from the surface water treatment plants and containment facilities into ponds and creeks. And yeah, that's about it. So to be taken from that, most contamination occurs at the first 100 to 500 feet. So how can the fracking process be improved? Well, it would certainly look better on the oil and gas companies if they would disclose what they're using in the fracking fluid. Right now they've been protected by legislation and trade secrecy agreements that they don't have to disclose all the carcinogens they're pumping underground. So they're spared from that fate. They can also double up on the steel and concrete encasings around that underground pipeline. I mean, how much more cost does it take just to, double up on concrete? Better recycling of fracturing fluid. I know this is, waste treatment and water treatment is extremely expensive, but when it comes to your drinking water, I don't want them to spare any expense. And if it can be helped, avoid setting up fracking sites on farmland. Because, if you have cows drinking a contaminated water supply, their systems are contaminated, which means their milk and their meat are contaminated, which we then ingest, and it contaminates us, and it's just a nasty chain of contamination that I'd love to improve. Now, another consequence of fracking is it uses a lot of water. As I said, 3 million gallons of water per fracture, and one well can be fractured up to 17 times. And when you have a drought-stricken area, especially in South Texas, how much water can you spare? Can you spare 60 million gallons of water? That's a lot of water. And especially when you're surrounded by farmland, who needs the water more, the oil and gas company or the farmer who has to make a living? So we really have to compromise on this issue. At the same time that fracturing offers cheap, relatively clean energy as far as CO2 emissions go, do we let it compromise the safety of our water supply? I don't want my thyroid failing, I don't want my hair falling out, but at the same time, I don't want my electricity bill to triple. So hopefully engineering techniques will allow improvements in this process. Maybe we can find a superior process to hydraulic fracturing and do away with it as it is now. I mean, process hasn't changed much since 1948. Hopefully we can add in some safety features anyway to make this safer for our environment. And that is it. I would ask the audience questions, but don't have much. There you go. You could ask a question if you want, but.
So where'd you find that video?
It's just YouTube. I first saw it on a documentary on Netflix, and I was just kind of stricken by it. That same lady also got a brain tumor.
Oh.
So, yeah, I don't know if that's coincidental with
Possibly
her drinking
correlated.
water, but